be increased? Is this new salary structure, is it going to add a lot of burden to the Nigerian system that we're already struggling, the Nigerian economy that we're already struggling with, or there's already a space that is untapped that they want to now start tapping into? So I'm concerned about this salary structure. These stories did not necessarily give us what line of action that they're going to take, from what space are they going to, or from what account are they going to be taking out this salary, of what use, of what reform are they going to be putting together to be able to help with this salary increment or salary structure that they are proposing? And let me say that there are 469 of these federal lawmakers. So you imagine how many legislative aides that they must have. So increasing the salary structure, I must say, personally, is very far-fetched. But then we would go on a very short break and, of course, return, talking deeply about the national minimum wage versus the salary structure of the National Assembly. So do not go anywhere. We'll be right back shortly.
Tell us you're a Nigerian without saying a word. Energy security is one of the most pressing issues for many developing countries like Nigeria. And if there's going to be any meaningful progress, addressing our energy issues is non-negotiable.
I need to see light from my house. Make them do something.
Band A is expensive. I literally have to turn off all my appliances just to reduce costs.
We need light.
Introducing the Energy Outlook, your go-to show for everything energy. Every week, we'll bring you the latest insights, innovation, and in-depth analysis of Nigeria's energy sector. From policy discussions to regulatory insights, we'll analyze the key decisions influencing growth and sustainability in the energy sector. We'll bring you the human stories behind the headlines, giving you a personal perspective on the broader energy challenges. Join me every Friday at 6 p.m. for the Energy Outlook, your guide to the future of energy, where energy means business.
This season on Heartlines, we're committed to making a difference in people's lives. So Heartlines, in partnership with Reda Consult, is offering 12 free slots of counseling every quarter for people in need of professional counseling. Additionally, we're taking on 2 pro bono cases for individuals navigating a challenging divorce. To participate, please send an email to counsel@vedaconsult.com with your story. Our team will carefully review all submissions and will contact all the shortlisted candidates. Heartlines is live Mondays to Fridays at 10 p.m, so engage with us.
Thank you for staying tuned. If you just tuned in, we are discussing the special salary structure versus the national minimum wage, and we're talking about a tale of two realities. If you want to call us, our phone lines are open to you. Please call us on 070-2500-7749 and 070-1424-2420. Of course, I have Segun Shopiton here with me. Hi, Segun. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Yes.
How are you?
So earlier on, I read the story about the NAS discussing the capacity building and how they have to increase or, in this sense, help the legislative aids of the 469, federal lawmakers that we have in Nigeria. And I was asking, is this feasible as compared to the national minimum wage that Nigeria or many states are still currently having issues to pay? So what do you think about this story?
Well, I think the title of the story is actually pretty appropriate. When you say a tale of two, it reminds me of a tale of two cities. And indeed, Nigeria as a country is actually, I always like to say, is a country of contradictions, and is indeed a tale of two realities, where public officials, whether elected or appointed, the large majority of them live a different reality from the reality of the average Nigerian. This is just another example of one of such instances. We all know what is happening today with cost of living crisis and all of that. And we all know how, in spite of all the best efforts, maybe the government to appear to be doing something, that nothing much has really changed in the last 2 years plus, since the lives of Nigerians have been disrupted by reforms that some would argue necessary. Nigerians are just finding a way to make it through. In the middle of all of that, we are now beginning to hear, very interestingly, rumbles about salary increments. Now, let's not forget that the recently approved minimum wage by the president, which, was delayed in implementation, but having now been implemented by the federal government and some state governments, is still not enough. 70,000 naira per month simply does nothing for you. There are different statistics, even from the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS, their National Living Standard Survey, that suggests that the average ordinary, not the average, the ordinary Nigerian spends about 65% of their income on food alone, and another significant chunk on transportation. And that by the time they've taken care of those two cost items, there's nothing left. It's the federal government's own data gathering agency that has given us these numbers. So the 70,000 is not enough. And yet, the legislature has thought it fit to suggest significant increments for their aids. And ironically, just recent news has also shown that even the federal government, the RAMFAC, Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission, that is constitutionally empowered to set the remuneration of public officials, has now started a process of reviewing the salaries of public officials, of political appointees, the president, the governors, legislators, state house of assembly, commissioners, so on and so forth. Which one some would argue maybe is long overdue, but given the current realities of the country, really wonder whether these actions, whether from the legislature with regards to their aids or from RAMFAC, whether these actions are appropriate in the moment, given the realities of the moment, and given the failures of the government to properly address the hardship that Nigerians are still going through. I think that until we deal with the problems that the government's own policies have created for Nigerians, we shouldn't be talking about helping public servants that are supposed to be working for those same Nigerians out of the problems that those public servants have created for the rest of Nigeria. So I think it's a bit of, as usual, the cart being placed in front of the horse and asking asking the cart to drag us forward.
Thank you very much, Shegun. While I was reading on this story, I tried to pick from many different resources that I had. And I saw in one of the stories where some aides complained about being paid like a civil servant, or even worse, they still complained about being paid a meager 30,000 naira. And many have said that that's probably why this special salary structure, came into play. But the realities of Nigeria, just you have mentioned, you see that Nigerians struggle day to day. And you also said these people were or have been appointed to serve Nigeria and Nigerians at large. So could you help us maybe understand, let me act like I can't put it together, now acting as a layman Nigerian at this point. Could you help us understand what they mean by their special salary structure, like in the Nigerian context, and how this might, differ from the national minimum wage framework that we already have?
Pardon me. I think that it's important that it should be said, even if it's only for the records purposes, that the legislature must recognize that they are, in spite of the fact that they make the laws for Nigeria, they are accountable to Nigerians.
Absolutely.
And they are not above the law. That whatever actions that they take must reflect the wishes and the will of Nigerians. After all, they're representatives of just almost unilaterally creating legislation, so to speak, that it falls outside of national minimum wage act. I would really, really love to study precisely what they're trying to do and how they intend to situate that within the context of the provisions of that act, because that act is binding on all Nigerians. And a lot of people might not know, but it's binding not only on government organizations, but also on private institutions.
Yes.
Nobody's expected to pay lower than 70,000 naira anywhere in Nigeria today. So if the National Assembly now is trying to implement a different structure for their staff, for their legislative aides, and their other administrative staff, I'd like to see where they're going to draw their powers from and how they're going to tie that to the provisions of national minimum wage. Because if they pay anything different from that structure, given that they are public servants, particularly, then they may well run afoul of the law. So it will be interesting to see how they ensure that whatever they're trying to do remains consistent with the content of the national minimum wage law, such that they don't then get accused of breaking the law or of running a parallel payment structure. Now, let's not forget that it is this same legislators that have over the years been drawing allowances and payments to themselves that are far above, several multiples above the amounts that have been approved, for them. They claim the structure of these things as some sort of impossible expenses. We all, so these same legislatures are already breaking the law of the country. That's exactly what they're doing. It's not analytics, not from that reality and that truth, but that's what it is. And then the same legislators now want to create a parallel salary structure for their own aides. I think that would be very unfortunate, unless maybe I would just provide a slight caveat and say I have not seen, the precise text of what they're trying to do, and therefore one may not be able to speak very categorically as to how appropriate and legal it might be, but it doesn't sound, even from the optics perspective, it doesn't sound.
I absolutely agree. And this is looking like a double standard to me, because you have mentioned that if they will bring in the laws, and then they could also do well as break them, because obviously they will look at it that what will Nigerians do anyway? All we do is maybe talk and talk and talk, but those laws are still binding when they want it to bind. And it brings me to wonder how the credibility of our system, of our governance system, now starts to look like. If 1 minute we are here and it looks good or it looks bad, and then people come together and they start to enact another law where it puts Nigeria into bigger debts or even worse economic realities. Don't you think that this starts to undermine the credibility of our governance system? Especially when, I remember very well on Monday, we addressed when Canada said that the APC and PDP declared that the APC and PDP are terrorist organizations. And on the show, we had to discuss how this reflects, or this puts us, on what table this puts us as Nigeria and Nigerians, what they would see where every time we go out and we're talking about being Nigerian, they're like, okay, your two major parties have been declared by a Canada judge that it's a terrorist organization, therefore in extension is a terrorist country. So does this not start to undermine the credibility of our governance system when we have double standard laws just roaming free everywhere?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's quite unfortunate. Excuse me. It's quite unfortunate that our public officials continue to do great service and injustice to the reputation of Nigeria. Our governance structures and systems, you know, fortunately, are not working for the majority. I always use that expression because it's recognized that it is working. Those systems are working very well, but for a few. And they're working precisely as designed, but only for a few. You know, so it's a when you spoke about the issue of credibility of our governance systems, all of that, I mean, I smiled to myself because I just asked myself, what credibility? Nigerians have lost complete faith in government and governance. Nigerians live in their own reality and their own existence by themselves. Government really, they really want to be honest, doesn't do much for them. You know, so Nigerians are just there. In fact, in most instances, the government and government institutions and agencies and officials are more of nuisance value to most Nigerians than enablers of stability, organization, and progress that they ought to be. So there's no credibility to worry about until we begin to do things right and until accountability is demanded of our government systems, structures, officials, and so on and so forth. There's no credibility, especially as Nigerians are concerned. The trust deficit that exists between Nigerians today and government, whether at the federal level, state level, or the local level, whether government in terms of their tiers of government, whether it's executive, legislature, judiciary, Nigerians don't trust their government, and for good reason. I was speaking on another platform yesterday, and I was asking people to cast their minds back, you know, or even if you were not alive then, or you're not old enough, just go and look at what history says about where we were in 1970, thereabouts, where China was at that time, where Singapore was at that time, where the United Arab Emirates were at that time.
Okay, I think that network has had Shegun.
Compare those.
Okay, he's back.
I also want to look at the South Koreas of this world. Can you hear me?
Yes, Shegun, I can hear you. Please continue.
Okay. So I was saying, I've asked Nigerians to just go do a little bit of research and see where we were in 1970, at about 50, 55 years ago, and where China, South Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, United Arab Emirates, maybe pick one or two African countries as well, and look at where they were relative to where Nigeria was, whether it's in terms of GDP or whether it's in terms of the major infrastructure points, rail networks, road networks, electricity supply. Just look at all of those factors, poverty rates, literacy rates, healthcare, delivery quality and standard, accessibility to water. Now, compare Nigeria today to those same countries today, and you will understand why Nigerian governments don't have credibility. And I'm not talking about whether it's this administration. This is not political talk. This is just reality of the lived experience of Nigerians. You will understand why Nigerians don't have any confidence in their government, why they don't see any usefulness of the government to them in their daily work as ordinary people, and why whatever the government does, in most instances, they're indifferent. So any of these things, special salary structure, national minimum wage, these things don't affect directly the majority of Nigerians anyway. So nobody's really paying attention. People are just trying to get by, make an honest living for themselves and their family and their children, protect their future, ensure that when they grow old, they have something to fall back on. That's it. You are basically on your own as a Nigerian. It's very unfortunate, but it's the reality. And sadly, given the way that our political structure is designed, it's not likely to change anytime soon unless something drastic happens to
Thank you
upset
very
the
much,
apple cart.
Shegun. Yes, let's go on a very short break. And of course, when we return, we'll start to dive deeper into this minimum wage and maybe what we can do differently to also inform the government about what they are doing and even watch things unfold as this story continues to develop. So do not go anywhere. We'll be right back shortly.
Life is made up of moments, some that fill us with joy, others that test our strength. Welcome to Heartlines. This is our space to explore the highs and lows of human connection, the love, the heartbreak, and resilience that shapes our life. From relationships to friendships, parenting to partnerships, and so much more. Every week, we share stories and conversations that define us, navigating love, separations, the struggles of parenting, dealing with anxiety and managing the pressures and stress of life. Real conversations that bring us closer, helping us heal, grow, and connect. So join me Mondays through Fridays at 10 p.m. for Heartlines, the show where we'll connect hearts, have real conversations with real people, one story at a time.
If you just tune in, you are still watching Politics Uncensored, and here we speak the truth and nothing but the truth. So we still have Shegun here, and now we want to go into the conversation about the new minimum wage. And it's very concerning because we have we are waiting to see how this story continues to unfold. But our guest already said it, that even from the optics and from the headlines and the stories, it's not giving what it ought to give. And this should be concerning to Nigerians, even as much as Nigerians just want to get by and trying to put things together for themselves and just maybe survive at least, and beyond all of the economic realities that we are currently facing. But we have the state governments now watching this or reading the news, and they are already reluctant about paying the new minimum wage. And if we look at inflation and even the rising cost of living, do you think 70,000 naira even meets the definition of a living wage in today's Nigeria, as compared to this new special salary structure that the government are looking at?
It's a bit of a conundrum, I want to be honest. There's no doubt that 70,000 minimum wage is nowhere near enough. I mean, it's not, you can't, it takes nobody home. And as people will say in street balance, can't even take you to the bus stop, to talk of taking you home. Given the current realities, I think there's a statistic that I saw somewhere recently that said that the minimum amount that would adequately cover the living expenses of an ordinary Nigerian that you would consider as poor is somewhere around 180,000 naira. And that, in fact, if you really want to now talk of just living a barely comfortable life, you have to be earning at least 250,000 naira. 180,000 naira. Let's go work with that, and then you compare that to the minimum wage, which, I mean, is we're talking less than half of that number. And that will tell you that the minimum wage is nowhere near enough. However, the conundrum, right? The conundrum is that even this new minimum wage, as implemented by the federal government now, has taken our wage bill to 4 trillion naira. 4 trillion naira per month. When you juxtapose that with what the total budget, figures are, then you realize that this amount is a lot. Then again, you have to remember that given the removal of subsidies and the increased inflows, revenue inflows to government coffers from the liberalization of the exchange rate regime of the country, that you would have expected that the government should at least be relatively comfortably able to pay that. So there are a lot of things to look at for us to determine whether 70,000 is enough as minimum wage. In my opinion, it's nowhere near enough. In my opinion, even when those strikes were going on and the battle waged between the federal government and organized labor, the rest of some civil society components, I said I was disappointed when labor settled for 70,000, because I thought that they should at least not be talking of less than 150,000 naira as minimum wage in this country today, given what had happened with inflation in the last 2 years. But here we are. So 70,000 is nowhere near good enough. I think that whatever happens, if we're sticking to that 70,000, then government officials cannot, in good conscience, begin to talk about making any increments to their own salaries at the moment. Especially because we all know that these government officials don't necessarily survive on these salaries anyway. Yeah. They have a lot of allowances that they approve for themselves, and many of them don't even touch these salaries.
And many other things.
Yeah, all sorts of crazy sounding allowances, disturbance allowance, inconvenience. I think there's one they call a hardship. Yes.
Yes, hardship allowance for the sufferings that have suffered. for the sufferings
They'll
that I've
say
so
they have
suffered for Nigerians, I should be paid a hardship allowance. I remember
it's
very well,
crazy.
Shegun, I remember very well this a year ago, I was talking to someone about, because, you know, for someone who is very much interested in politics, I try to read as widely as I can. So while I was reading about the basic salary structure, the allowances, this, that, the duties, the roles of some of these government officials, or most of these government officials, I started seeing a lot of irregularities, and I started to question why this was so. And at some point, I started to ask my dad that, could you tell me some of how did this come to play? Who were the people that sat together and thought that these allowances should be put in place, and why the basic salary was not enough in the first place? And what exactly, beyond the paper duties and roles, I expected of these people? And I see why a lot of people want to go into politics. Because first, I see how people kill themselves, how so many people are so hung on to power. And this tells us why. It's a clear structure of why people want to kill themselves with just getting into this space. And I was just saying this morning also that if this special salary structure was to exist, and it goes maybe as far as earning so much more than a civilian would, then what am I doing? What am I doing here? Why am I speaking so much English? Why don't I just go into some of these existing elite institutions so that I can be part of the percentage that would not complain about the issue? So I'm wondering that this already would deepen the economic divide that we already have between ordinary workers and those in these privileged circles. So my concern now is that what can really be done to harmonize salaries across sectors while still recognizing, not denying the fact that there are unique responsibilities of certain roles, from lecturers, you know, to teachers, to medical doctors and all of these people. So what can be done exactly to start to harmonize salaries across the sectors while still recognizing their unique responsibilities?
Yeah, very interesting question. And to be honest with you, I don't necessarily think that we should be seeking to do that, because, and I say that because value, salaries are really, basically remuneration for value addition, value creation. And you will agree that there are certain professions that arguably create significant traction in terms of value addition.
Absolutely.
To society. And therefore, argument would be that they should be better paid. I think the problem that we probably have is there is an unjustifiable imbalance when you compare value addition, and commensurate compensation by way of remuneration across the different sectors. There's a huge, clear imbalance in that, and maybe that's what we should be trying to correct. So I have no issues, for example, if central bank officials exist on a different salary structure and they get paid a bit higher than the average civil servant. And one could argue that the work that they do is very cerebral, and what they do helps stabilize the rest of the economy and enables the country to grow economically and to progress in terms of development. But how do you then justify the huge disparity between what legislators and elected officials earn versus, let's take the education sector. You mentioned teachers, and my mind went to a conversation that I was having again this afternoon about professors. I mean, you'll be shocked to discover that there is no professor in Nigeria in a public school, public university, that earns more than 500,000, maybe up to the word actually, 500,000 naira per month. No professor. Professor. That is the pinnacle in the academia. And if as a professor, it means that you not only have you, reeled out very significant research work that is supposed to have contributed to society, you would have also groomed and trained a lot of doctorates, who have also contributed in terms of knowledge, the knowledge pool of society. And yet, the professor is getting less than 500,000 naira officially, and the governor or the senator, even in terms of just their salary, before we talk about those humongous, crazy allowances, is earning multiples of that. So maybe we shouldn't necessarily be trying to seek how to balance this, to make them equal, but that we should ensure that there is a way to measure, to scale the importance of these different sectors and remunerate them accordingly. Institutions of higher learning and the educational sector generally is the foundation of society. Just do it from bottom up and destroy the education sector, destroy their university, destroy their schools, destroy their school system, ensure that they don't get good quality people to teach anymore, and that within 30 years that country will be dead.
Absolutely.
And it seems to be what our reality is today. So I think that we need to look at those different sectors, determine what value they're adding to society, and ensure that there's a balance, across board, to compensate that value appropriately.
I completely agree with you, Shegun. Thank you very much. And I like how you have left or how you've wrapped up this conversation, and that should be the government should start looking into appropriate value-added remuneration for every sector, so that then as Nigerians, when we start to read and look deeper into how some of these people are paid, we can agree with what they give them, rather than when we wake up with strike today, strike tomorrow, and we as Nigerians have nothing to say because obviously they are not being properly paid. So thank you very much for joining this conversation. I really appreciate your insight and contribution. Well, today's conversation has revealed very deep contradictions in Nigeria's wage system. A minimum wage is meant to guarantee dignity for all workers, yet we see many Nigerians still suffer from this hardship. And we also see aides in the National Assembly, at the very heart of our democracy, earning far more than the law prescribes. So what is the way forward? And the tale of these two realities isn't just about numbers, it's about fairness, credibility, and trust in governance. So until Nigeria starts to resolve this contradiction, the fight for equity and justice in our economy will remain incomplete. This is a very special thank you to Shegun Sopitan for sharing his insights. And to our viewers, thank you for joining us. I am the Poly-Humanitarian, and this has been Politics Uncensored. Good day and stay very much politically aware. Before I go, do ensure you subscribe to our YouTube channel at Official Upgrade TV. I'll see you again on Friday. Good day.